Down you go. Die. Good fight. Go to hell. Let's have some fun. You shall die.
If you want to get more closely acquainted with Vergil's Doppelganger mechanic, I strongly encourage you to watch my first video, which is basically this Doppelganger guide, where I go very in-depth into the basics, the rudimentary aspects of this mechanic. The link to that video will be in the description below, so yeah. So first things first, before I start talking about the combo and the mistakes you can make and all that jazz, I should preface this by talking about my controls. So I play this game using my mouse and keyboard. Yeah, really. Blasphemy, I know. But I think that if you've ever played a single game on your PC using a mouse and a keyboard, these controls should be familiar to you. I think they're very easy to grasp. So, just like with almost every game ever, WASD are the keys you use for movement. So W is forward, S is backwards, A is left, D is right. This is the equivalent to you using your analog stick for moving, like tilting it left, right, forward, backward. That's basically what I use. So again, W forward, S backward, A left, D right. Obviously, just like in every game ever, space is jump. So I jump using space. The left mouse button, unsurprisingly, is the attack button. Also, like in every game ever. The right mouse button is the button I use for Mirage Blades. So all my Mirage Blade attacks are mapped to the right button. The right mouse button, I mean. So that's basically it for these basic controls. Shift is the button I use for locking on. So when I lock on, I press Shift. In this game, you gotta be locked on for just about any attack ever. Only under specific circumstances should you release the lock on. But yeah, basically lock on is Shift in my case. So next up, we've got the trick action. So, trick up, down, air trick, all that stuff. I use E. So E is the button I use. So if I press E without locking on, that is trick up. If I press E while locking on, like Shift plus E, that is air trick, and I teleport. If I press back to forward plus E, or S plus W plus E, that is trick down. So, like I said, E is the trick action. That's the button I use for tricking, basically. R is the button I use for taunting. So that's the taunt button. Air taunts, lock-on taunts, doesn't matter. R is the button you gotta press for taunting. Moving on, I have F, and F is the button I use to charge my Sin Double trigger. So I press and hold F, then I release it, and I basically go into my Sin Double trigger mode. Moving on, we also have 1 and 2. So 1 is the button for changing the weapon to the right. So my layout is as follows. I use the default layout for my weapons, my arsenal. So it goes Yamato, Beowulf, Mirage Edge. So if I have the Yamato equipped and I press 1, it will switch to Beowulf, which is the weapon to its right. And if I press 1 again, it will switch from Beowulf to the Mirage Edge, which is the weapon to its right. If I have the Yamato equipped, and I press 2, it will go to the weapon that's on its left, and that is the Mirage Edge. If I press 2 again, it will switch to Beowulf. If I press 2 again, it will once again switch to the Yamato. So that's how this works. We're switching weapons left and right. That's how it works. Moving on, we have the Doppelganger buttons. So the buttons are as follows. X is the slow doppelganger. This is a doppelganger that is kind of delayed by about, I don't know, half a second or something. So that's X. C is the normal doppelganger. He is slightly delayed, not by half a second, but like he's just not completely in sync with you. So that's C. And V is the haste version of the doppelganger who is completely in sync with you, meaning that he immediately reacts to your commands and he mimics your inputs. He registers them immediately and simply reacts to them. So, yeah. I deactivate the doppelganger by pressing Z. So that's how I do it. And, you know, that's pretty much those are all the controls, really. There are some other things like, you know, using CTRL to basically lock onto multiple targets, or, I mean, switch the lock on, stuff like that, or using the arrows, using, you know, it just doesn't matter, really. These are the main things that you will need. So, if I say, I'm pressing D plus left mouse button, that means that I'm pressing right plus attack button. If I say I'm pressing S plus W plus left mouse button, that means I'm pressing back to forward plus attack button. Kind of like tilting your analog stick back and then forward and then pressing the attack button. So that's how it works. If I say back to forward plus right mouse button, or S plus W plus right mouse button, that is basically back to forward plus your Mirage Blade button. So heavy rain blades in my case. But don't worry, most of the time, like 99% of the time, I'll say right plus attack button instead of D plus left mouse button, because I feel like that's more universally comprehensible, if you know what I mean. So, yeah, these are my controls, and now let's talk about the actual combo. Alright, so now we got the street combo, and this is the first combo that I did. The combo that started all of this, like this whole combo journey that I embarked on. So this is the most famous Vergil combo. It's literally called the combo. It's, you know, this combo by Sunhee Legend, or Sunhai Legend, I don't really know how to pronounce his name. And like I said, it's literally got this iconic status. It's got like 15 million views on YouTube. And this one combo, it sparked all of these Vergil statuses, all of these memes, all of this stuff. But funnily enough, this combo is actually one of the easiest combos on the list, and it's really easy to do. I've seen a lot of people try to replicate this combo, casual players and, you know, all sorts of people, and some of them have had success, but I've noticed that a lot of them fail at certain points, and they don't do the combo perfectly. So I'm making this tutorial to facilitate things, you know, to make learning this combo easier. So yeah. Alright, so I should preface this by talking about Vergil's taunt. So by the end of the combo, by the very end of the combo, you're supposed to use the Let's Have Some Fun taunt, where Vergil basically conjures this small miniature Mirage Blade around his finger, and he spins it, and then the enemy falls onto it, and then they get propelled into the air. Now, you can't use this taunt unless your style rank is triple S, or Smoke and Sexy style. If it's lower than triple S, even if it's double S, you won't be able to use the taunt. Now, look at this. I entered the void, I opened the void, and the first thing I did, first try, was the combo, and I did it perfectly. Now, as you can see, I didn't have any rank when I started the combo. And as a result, you know, I worked my way, you know, through D, C, B, all that stuff. And when the time came to use the taunt, I couldn't use it because my style rank was not triple S, it was double S. So I tried starting the combo with D rank, and it was the exact same. When it was time to use the taunt, my style ranking was simply not triple S, it was double S. So if I did this, you know, I started the combo with C rank, and I basically, when the time came to use the taunt, I had triple S. You know, my rank was triple S, and I could use the taunt, albeit barely, because, you know, you can see how it was barely triple S. So I would recommend starting this combo when your style rank is either C or higher. Like, not C, maybe B or A even. It really doesn't matter as long as it's not D and as long as it's not lower than D. So that's one thing. There is an alternative to all this, and that is to use the trainer, the collaborative trainer. So you simply go to taunt selector, you use it, and you replace the lock-on taunt and the S rank lock-on taunt with let's have some fun. And then when the time comes to use the taunt, you simply use the lock-on taunt, and Vergil will use the let's have some fun taunt irrespective of your style rank. So yeah. There is also another thing you can do. You can simply not use the taunt. So after using the heavy rain blades, you simply immediately use Judgment Cut End, and that's it. But yeah. This looks way cooler, you know, with the taunt. So you start the combo off by using /2 with the Yamato, and then you immediately use Aerial Rave 2, Aerial Rave B, whatever. So Aerial Rave 2 is just attack button, pause, and then you press the attack button and you keep mashing it. But in this case, you're supposed to press attack button, pause, and then you press the attack button a third time, and you keep holding it. And then you release it to use this Judgment Cut, alright? Alright, so if you don't hold the attack button long enough, you simply won't use a Judgment Cut. It won't come out. So you gotta hold it for a very long time, and then release it. So, again, you use /2, you use Aerial Rave 2, which is attack button, pause, and you press and hold the attack button. Once you release the attack button and use a Judgment Cut, you wait a little, you don't trig down immediately, but you wait a little, and then you trig down, and then you use a Void Slash to catch the enemy. I'll explain, you know, this part can be really problematic, and I'll explain that later, but for now, let's just, you know, continue talking about the combo. So you trap the enemy with Void Slash, and you summon the haste version of the Doppelganger, the one who is in sync with you and mimics all of your commands immediately. So you call the haste version of the Doppelganger, and before he's fully formed, while he's a blur, you don't wait, this is imperative, you don't wait. Before he's even fully formed, while he's a blur, you use Rapid Slash, which is right plus attack button. So it's very important to basically summon the Doppelganger and use Rapid Slash before they're fully formed, like while they're a blur. Because if you wait for the haste Doppelganger to fully form and then use Rapid Slash when he's fully formed, what's going to happen is the Doppelganger will use Rapid Slash with you because he copies your commands and is in sync with you. But if he's not fully formed, he's just going to stay there, and he's not going to copy anything. That is what you want. You want him to stay there, so you do Rapid Slash before the Doppelganger is fully formed. That is the key to doing this part. You don't wait. Before he's even fully formed, while he's a blur, you use Rapid Slash, which is right plus attack button. And now, simultaneously, you basically, when you reach the other side, you input the heavy rain blades to freeze the enemy in time so they don't fall to the ground. Alright? And now, you wait. You wait for Vergil to completely sheath his sword. This is imperative, and I'll explain why. So you wait for Vergil to sheath his sword, and only after he's done sheathing his sword do you use Yamato Combo C, which is, as you already know, you press the attack button 4 or 5 times, then you make a slight pause, and then you continue mashing like a maniac. So that is Yamato Combo C. Now, let me explain something. I said how you're supposed to wait for Vergil to sheath his sword completely before using Yamato Combo C. Now, the reason for this is, if you try to use Yamato Combo C, and you start mashing the attack button before Vergil is done sheathing his sword, what's going to happen is, Vergil won't cancel this animation, he will still sheath his sword, but he won't use Yamato Combo C, but his Doppelganger will. So the Doppelganger will start Yamato Combo C, while Vergil will be too busy sheathing his sword, as you can see here. And then, obviously they will desync, and the combo won't work. It won't even start. So the reason this happens is because, and I've explained this so many times, It's because Vergil doesn't react to melee commands while he's sheathing his sword. As you can see here, I'm sheathing my sword, and I'm pressing the attack button. I keep mashing it like a maniac, but Vergil is simply not reacting. He's not going to react until he's completely done sheathing his sword, which is exactly why you're supposed to wait for Vergil to sheath his sword and then start Yamato Combo C. Alright, so you mash the attack button four to five times, and then you make a slight pause. And during this pause, it is important AF, it is incredibly important to input one Mirage Blade. You throw one Mirage Blade at the enemy to keep them airborne. So you throw this Mirage Blade at the enemy during this pause after the fourth or, well, fifth hit of Yamato Combo C. Now, if you don't throw this Mirage Blade at the enemy during this pause, they will simply fall to the ground and the barrage will not connect. And I don't need to tell you why this is bad. So, again, you basically just use the first four hits of Yamato Combo C, and then you make this pause. During the pause, you input one Mirage Blade. You basically press the Mirage Blade button once, or in my case, I press the right mouse button once to keep the enemy airborne, and then you just continue mashing the attack button. And you mash like a maniac, and then at one point you press and hold the attack button. You stop mashing it, you just start holding it, and then you keep holding it, and now Vergil and the Doppelganger will finish the Yamato Combo C barrage. At this point, as soon as they're done with the last hit of Yamato Combo C, you basically throw another Mirage Blade at the enemy to keep them airborne, to keep them from falling to the ground or flying too far away. So, after the Combo C barrage, you basically, keep mashing the attack button, then you start holding the attack button. Once the barrage is done, you throw one Mirage Blade at the enemy, and you release the attack button to use this perfect Judgment Cut. Now, let me explain. There are two things that can go wrong here. The first thing that can go wrong is if you don't throw this Mirage Blade at the enemy after this Yamato Combo C, what's going to happen is they will basically fly too far away and they will be on the ground and you won't be able to use Air Trick to teleport to them. So that is one thing. Another thing that can happen is if you don't release the attack button at the right time, Vergil will use a regular Judgment Cut instead of a perfect Judgment Cut, and that will cause the combo to fail because Vergil will use this backdash and the enemy will fall to the ground. So you need to have this perfect timing. I've seen so many people attempt this combo and they fail because they don't know how to use a perfect Judgment Cut. Yes, you need timing, but it's laughably easy. You just need to know exactly when to release the attack button after holding it for so long. So, again, to recap this part. You use Yamato Combo C, you use the first 4 or 5 hits of Yamato Combo C, and now during this pause, you make a pause, and during this pause, you throw one Mirage Blade at the enemy to keep them airborne. Then you continue mashing the attack button like a maniac, and then you press and hold the attack button, and when the combo is done, after the last hit of the combo of Yamato Combo C, you throw another Mirage Blade at the enemy, and shortly after that, you release the attack button to use the perfect Judgment Cut. Alright, so that's it. Now, you use Air Trick to teleport to the enemy who is in the air, and you use Aerial Cleave to pin the enemy to the ground. Now you switch to Beowulf, and you use Beast Uppercut to launch the enemy into the air. Now you use Strafe, or well, the side dash. Now, the way I use this is, since I'm to the enemy's left, I press back plus jump, or S plus space. But if I was facing the enemy like this, if the enemy was in front of me and not to my right, then I would have to press right plus jump, or D plus space. But since I'm to the enemy's left, the camera's facing this way, I press backward plus jump, or S plus space. So after using this side dash, or well, strafe, you're supposed to use Lunar Phase, and then you use kick 13, and you make sure to keep holding the attack button because you want to use the full kick 13 that launches Vergil into the air alongside the enemy, with those 2 launching kicks at the end. Rising Sun, basically. So if you don't use this, Vergil will simply use a regular kick 13 and the enemy won't be launched into the air. So remember to keep holding the attack button while you're using kick 13. Now you use Starfall and you switch the Mirage Edge and you use Drive. And immediately after using Drive, or well simultaneously, you input the Heavy Rain Blades. Now you use Stinger to basically close in on the enemy, and now while you're below the enemy, you use the Let's Have Some Fun taunt, and Vergil will conjure this small Mirage Blade and spin around his finger. At some point, the Heavy Rain Blades will disappear and the enemy will be unfrozen, and they will fall directly onto Vergil's mini Mirage Blade. And this will cause the enemy to get propelled into the air again. At this point, you start charging Judgment Cut End with the Yamato, and you make sure, this is very important, you make sure to throw 2 Mirage Blades at the enemy while they're while they're falling, basically. Because if you don't do this, the enemy will fall to the ground before you can use Judgment Cut End, because Judgment Cut End takes a long time to charge. So you gotta make sure to basically throw these 2 Mirage Blades at the enemy. It doesn't have to be 2, you can throw as many as you like. Just make sure it's not only 1. And make sure there's like a time, like there's a pause, like 1, pause, 2. So I would recommend that. Of course, you don't have to do it like that, but it's kind of like the ideal way to do it. So that is how you do this street combo, or well, the infamous I Am the Storm That Is Approaching combo. Now, let's go over some of the most frequent mistakes you can make with this combo. Alright, so I mentioned this one part potentially being a very big problem, and I still think that's the most problematic part of the combo. So, you need to know exactly when to use Trig Down after using this Judgment Cut. And you can see this little comparison here. So, you need to use Trig Down only after these particles, like most of these particles from the Judgment Cut, have disappeared. So you can see here, I made this mistake a billion times. I would Trig Down too early. And when I used Void Slash, I would use it too early and it wouldn't catch the enemy. This happened so many times, I think it happened at least like 100 times. I'm not even exaggerating at this point, because this was the first combo I did, and I didn't really have a lot of experience. But, yeah, you need to know exactly when to Trig Down and how fast to use Void Slash. You need to have this perfect timing. You can see, like I said, you can see on the screen how I basically use Trig Down only after most of these particles from the Judgment Cut have disappeared. Like, when the enemy starts losing altitude, basically. Not really, but kinda. So, Void Slashing too early will cause the enemy to, well, not be caught by it. However, of course, there's another extreme that's obviously plausible, and that is Void Slashing too late. Now, if you Void Slash too late, the enemy will be caught by the Void Slash, but their feet will be touching the ground. Now, let me explain. You might be thinking, but why is this a problem, Marco? It shouldn't be a problem. I mean, you know, I get it, it's for stylish purposes, but, you know, I don't really care about that. And I get it. I know that the name of the game in DMC is to basically, you know, keep the enemy airborne for as long as possible because it's stylish, but in 99% of these combos, it's a necessity. It's not for stylish purposes. Now, if you look at the Tetsuzanko combo, I would make this mistake where I would basically use Void Slash too late and the enemy's feet would be touching the ground, but it wouldn't matter because the combo would work anyway. In the Tetsuzanko combo, this is solely for stylish purposes. You don't have to Void Slash in time. You can Void Slash, you know, later and the enemy will be on the ground, but it doesn't matter because you'll be perfectly capable of continuing the combo with no problems or repercussions. But with this combo, that is not the case, and let me explain. So if you Void Slash too late, after using Rapid Slash, as you already know, you're supposed to use Rapid Slash, and then you're supposed to input the Heavy Rain Blades to keep the enemy frozen in the air. But if the enemy is on the ground already, what's the point of using the Heavy Rain Blades to freeze them in time? What's the point of freezing the enemy with Heavy Rain Blades when they're already on the ground? The whole purpose of using the Heavy Rain Blades is to freeze them in space so that they would keep being airborne, right? However, you might be thinking, but wait, I still don't get it. How is this a problem? Just let the enemy be on the ground. Who cares? Well, let me explain. You know how you're supposed to use this Yamato Combo C Barrage with the Doppelganger, from both sides? And, alright, so if you use the combo, if you do it correctly, while the enemy is airborne, you use the Combo C Barrage, you throw those Mirage Blades, you do everything, and after using the Judgment Cut, you teleport to the enemy using Air Trick. And the enemy is airborne, so when you use Air Trick, you will teleport into the air, right? Because the enemy is in the air. And after that, you will be able to use Aerial Cleave with the Yamato. Because, you can only use Aerial Cleave when you're in midair. You can't use it on the ground, obviously. But what happens if the enemy is on the ground when you use the Combo C Barrage? Well, this happens. After the last hit of Yamato Combo C, the enemy will simply be launched not into the air, but onto the ground. They will be on the ground. So when you use the Perfect Judgment Cut and you try to teleport to the enemy using Air Trick, you will teleport while on the ground, because the enemy is on the ground and not in midair. You get what I'm trying to say? And if you teleport to the enemy on the ground, you won't be able to use Aerial Cleave because, obviously, you can only use Aerial Cleave while you're in midair. Now, I've seen this happen in so many combos because everyone and their grandma has tried replicating this combo, and I think this is the most common mistake I've encountered in a lot of these videos. So many people Void Slash too late, and the enemy speeder touching the ground, and then when they use the Combo C Barrage, and they use the final hit, the enemy gets blown away, but they don't get launched into the air. So when they use Air Trick, they simply teleport to the ground. And now they're like, oh, I can't use Aerial Cleave because I'm on the ground. So what do? They improvise, and they use Upper Slash with the Yamato, then they use Air Trick, and then they use Aerial Cleave, to continue the combo. But at that point, the combo has already failed. You failed. You can't. This is not acceptable. It doesn't look stylish. It breaks the flow. It's simply bad. And this is exactly why it's so important to have perfect timing when using Void Slash, knowing exactly when to use it. Don't use it too early. You got to know when to use Trick Down to descend to the ground, and when to use Void Slash. But obviously the combo fails if you Void Slash too early because the enemy won't get caught by the Void Slash. But if you use it too late, like I said, the combo will fail regardless, because when you use Yamato Combo C, the double barrage, after the last hit, the enemy will be on the ground. They won't be in midair. So when you teleport to the enemy, you're teleporting on the ground, and that is a huge no. It's a big issue. I said how I was going to go over some of the most frequent mistakes you can make with this combo, but it kind of occurred to me that I've already gone over all of the mistakes you can make with this combo, aside from the Void Slash issue, that I just mentioned. So, yeah, like I said, you could screw up the Mirage Blade part. It's very important that you throw a Mirage Blade at the enemy during the pause before the barrage, the Yamato Combo C mash. So during that pause, you got to throw a Mirage Blade at the enemy to keep them airborne, because if you don't, they will fall to the ground. And by the same token, by extension, you're also supposed to throw one Mirage Blade at the enemy after the Combo C Barrage, like during the last hit, when the enemy gets blown away, to make sure they don't fly away too far, or that they don't end up on the ground. So this last Mirage Blade is not always necessary, but it's definitely it would be desirable, if you know what I mean. It would be conducive to the overall combo. And of course, you got to make sure to hold the attack button after the mash and to know exactly when to release it to use a perfect Judgment Cut and not a regular one. Otherwise, the combo fails. So, yeah. I seriously wish I could explain the trig down void slash part a little better, but like I said, the only advice I can offer you is not to trig down immediately after using Judgment Cut. You wait just a little bit for all of these slash particles from the Judgment Cut to disappear, and then you trig down and use void slash. But it's really hard for me to like explain this. It's really something you need to do yourself and experience yourself and get a knack for it, because otherwise I'm afraid my, all my words are kind of like, in vain. So yeah, that's really unfortunate. I don't think, I mean, so many people have been able to completely perfectly replicate this combo, even casual players, so you're bound to get it down at some point. But yeah. Also, another mistake that would happen sometimes is like the stinger would not reach the enemy. That's something that would happen sometimes, but it wouldn't happen in the void that frequently, only on the street, mission map, you know what I mean? The one where I did the combo, like the original, like not in the void, but in game, like in the mission. And sometimes, I would use Stinger, and I wouldn't reach the enemy. I wouldn't be directly underneath them. I would just kind of be there, and the taunt would miss. They wouldn't land on my taunt, so yeah. And I've already mentioned that whole part. If you void slash too late, and then you use, the Yamato combo C double barrage while the enemy is not airborne but is on the ground, when you use the perfect Judgment Cut, and when you use the last hit of Yamato combo C, the enemy will not be launched to the air. They will be on the ground, so when you use air trick, you will teleport on the ground, and you won't be able to use aerial cleave. I've been over this a billion times. And finally, the most important mistake, well, not the most important mistake, but a really frequent mistake, and this happens with every combo that, you finish off with an ultimate, like Judgment Cut End, Hell on Earth, Deep Stinger. I would use air trick instead of the ultimate, instead of Judgment Cut End. So I am pressing all these buttons, and I know I'm pressing them, and the game somehow only registers this as me using air trick and pressing lock on plus trig button, or shift plus E, even though I'm pressing shift W E left mouse button. I don't know why. I guess it's the camera. I know it's the camera, but this is something that happens with almost every combo. I've probably missed something. It's kind of inevitable. You can't get everything down. But so there are probably some other mistakes you can make with this combo, but these are the most recurring ones that I personally had issues with. So yeah, that's all there is to know about the infamous I Am the Storm That Is Approaching combo.